Okay, everybody, let's take a look at Chapter 8. Chapter 8 deals with documentary evidence, maps, and diagrams as they are used in the courtroom. The definition, first of all, we look to the federal rules of evidence for the definition, and that would be anything containing letters, words, numbers, pictures, or sounds, whether on paper or other substance. So it's a pretty broad category of a definition. Generally speaking, documents can be divided into three categories. That would be writings, recordings, and photographs, and we'll talk about all three. First of all, an important term, authentication. Documents must be relevant, and they must be authenticated to be admissible in court as evidence. So the term authentication, it means that whoever wants that document to be admitted, they have to establish that the document is what they say it is. That's an authentication. That doesn't mean that the document is accurate. The document could be completely flawed, but we are concerned with whether it's authentic. It is what it is presented to be. This prevents fraudulent documents from being presented in court. At least that's the idea. So Federal Rule 901 provides a list of ways to authenticate documents. Although there's a list in 901, that paragraph also explicitly says that the list is for illustration only, and a judge can allow other methods of authentication. They are only presented for example. And here are the examples provided by Federal Rule 901. I'll just rattle them off. Testimony of a witness with knowledge, non-expert opinion about someone's handwriting, comparison by an expert witness or the trier of fact, by the way, that's the jury, distinctive characteristics, opinion about a voice, evidence about a telephone conversation, evidence about public records, about ancient documents more than 20 years old, data compilations, evidence about a process or a system, and methods provided by the law. Some documents are self-authenticating. Again, looking to the federal rules of evidence, this is when the law automatically assumes that the document was made for its apparent purpose. So it has a seal or some kind of authenticity indicator in it, on it, or attached to it. So what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at some types that are listed in Rule 902. Your textbooks will tell you that there are 12 different types of self-authenticating documents. There are actually a couple more that have been added probably since the printing of the textbook. Domestic public documents that are sealed and signed, and these are typically court records. They are sealed and not really generally available to the public. Also, public documents that are not sealed but signed and certified. A city clerk might certify the transcript or the agenda from a city council meeting. Foreign public documents, and it depends on the foreign government. Certified copies of public records. So when you get a copy of a public record from a public agency, if you ask for a certified copy, it'll get stamped and signed by a public official, indicating that it is a true reproduction of the document that it represents. Official publications, you might get something from the Department of Justice website that's an official publication by DOJ. Newspapers and periodicals, obviously, it's easy to authenticate because there were 10,000, 100,000 copies of this thing distributed on the day that the newspaper or periodical came out. Trade inscriptions, so this is like trademarks. Acknowledged documents, either acknowledged by somebody and witnessed or through the use of a notary. Commercial paper and related documents, presumptions under federal statute, certified domestic records of a regularly conducted activity. Again, that's very similar to a city council minutes, and the same thing for foreign governments. And the last two that are the add-ons are the electronic versions of the above. Forensic document examiners, these people used to be called handwriting experts, but they do so much more than that. So this is a better title. They can testify to the authenticity of a document or whether it's been altered or changed. These folks understand forged checks, forged money, anything that's physical on cardboard, fabric, and whether or not it's an authentic item or whether it's some kind of a reproduction or altered document. The instruction here is that questioned documents should be delivered to the examiner or expert in the same condition they were found. They should not be folded, cut, torn, marked, paper-clipped, or stapled. That's just common sense, keeping the item preserved and, of course, following the chain of custody. When people grow up and learn to write, they do develop their own style and sort of quirks, habits that translates through to their handwriting, including how quickly they write and word spacing, things like that. Our friendly forensic document examiners, or handwriting experts in this case, they're experts at picking up on that stuff and documenting it and identifying and testifying to those similarities. They can rule out or rule in an individual based on whether or not their handwriting matches the questioned item. They have to have an adequate sample of the suspect's handwriting. And as a matter of fact, I have obtained handwriting exemplars from suspects in the past. And there's a sort of a format. You have them write out a sentence or two several different times. And a person has a very difficult time trying to disguise their normal handwriting attributes when they do that, and doesn't fool an examiner. They can figure it out. They're not allowed, that is, the suspect's not allowed to invoke their Fifth Amendment privilege. In other words, when you write down and create a handwriting exemplar to be analyzed, you are not testifying against yourself. You're not really writing anything original. You're just writing down a handwriting sample. So Fifth Amendment doesn't apply here. The same type of writing tool should be used as the subject item, so a ballpoint pen or a quill or a pencil or a crayon or whatever it was. The examiner gives their expert opinion in court based on characteristics that are in the exemplar and the subject item. Interesting note here, the Secret Service, the folks who protect the president, they maintain a comprehensive library of inks and actually typesets that have been acquired over the years from manufacturers. So they can do chemical analysis and they can provide the source of the ink that is the manufacturer. Sometimes that's a clue or helpful in an investigation or to link somebody to a subject item. So how do we introduce the contents of documents into the courtroom? The laws of evidence prefer the original documents be used in court. That's not always available. The same rules apply either way. Primary evidence is the definition of the original document. It can also include an authenticated duplicate when the contents of the document are the only thing at issue. Secondary evidence is all the evidence that's produced around that document that establishes the existence or content of the original documents. Most of the time, the example is a rough draft. Sometimes it's previous drafts that are digital files of maybe a Word document, or even testimony about those who were involved in the document's creation or witnessed the circumstances that led up to the creation of the document. I know I'm being vague, but it's such a broad category. Everything but the document itself. Photographs, photographic evidence. They have to meet several requirements before being introduced. First of all, the photographs have to be relevant to the case. So the attorney has to ask the judge whether or not they can be admitted into court. By the way, a photograph also includes video. Well, they say videotapes here, but I don't know that anybody uses tapes anymore. But digital video and even x-rays. So if somebody's injuries are shown in an x-ray, that is a photograph under this definition. And so the foundation to make a photograph relevant in trial is that, yes, it's relevant to some point that is currently being contested. The photograph has to accurately portray the scene or the relevant scene that we're talking about. I think of a crime scene photograph. It has to actually be a photograph of the crime scene. It can't be a photograph of, somebody at the hospital bleeding, which leads me to really number 4. It can't be unduly prejudicial. You hear this a lot. Let's say the DA tries to introduce too many overly graphic pictures of the victim's injuries to where the jury is just going to be shocked by it and maybe angered by it. That is the definition of prejudicial, or could be. The judge might say, you know what, that's a little too much. I mean, we've established that the victim was injured and what the injury looked like, and you don't need to overdo show the whole surgery or whatever. So that's number 4. And so I skipped over 3, which is primary evidence. Remember we talked about primary being the original item, and again, that's preferred over secondary. Remember that photographs nowadays can be altered, so any of these items can be attacked by the other side, or challenged by the other side. They may want to bring in an expert that says, this photograph has been photoshopped. And that's where the witnesses are called to not only lay the foundation, but to challenge the authenticity or correctness of the evidence. Moving on, models, maps, and diagrams. Most courts allow a witness to use some sort of a diagram or map to illustrate what they're saying. The suspect went from here to here. The judge, again, retains a great deal of discretion on whether or not to allow a map, but typically they can use chalkboards and dry erase boards while they're testifying to draw out what they're trying to describe, as long as it assists them in providing their testimony. And of course, you can get fancy with computer-generated diagrams, 3D animated videos, becoming much more common. I see those especially when experts are testifying. If you have a collision reconstructionist kind of a person who went back and is trying to show speed from skid, and they might bring in computerized graphics and models to help show what they're talking about. That's about it for Chapter 8. I do encourage you to take a look at your textbook. There's tons of information about each of these concepts that'll help you understand each and every one of them. We'll see you in the discussions.